In this country right now, I think we may be in a moment where something is changing along the number line when a thing turns from science into business, into policy, and then ultimately into politics. It's about energy production in this country, the question of whether or not we pursue certain sources of energy. It's always been defined in part by how dangerous we feel that is. Nuclear energy, for example, was a huge hit in America at one point. It was the wave of the future until 3 Mile Island happened in 1974, and then the nuclear wave receded back into the sea. We haven't seen a new reactor built since. People began to feel like whatever its potential upside was, it was maybe too dangerous to be worth it to pursue more nuclear power. Part of the way that widespread feeling like that gets established, the feeling that something isn't worth it, or something's at least dangerous enough to look into whether it's worth it. Part of that is when you get powerful images like 3 Mile Island, or images like this. A guy in Colorado who's able to set his tap water on fire because of the natural gas drilling that's happening in the area where he lives. Enough methane gas has apparently seeped into his water supply that his tap water has become flammable. That's from the movie Gasland. But what if it's not just the water coming out of your tap that you're able to set on fire? What if it's also puddles that are collecting on your property? This is a video of a man in northeast Pennsylvania collecting water from a puddle bubbling up near his house. And then he's able to light the fumes off that water on fire. State officials think a natural gas energy company drilling in the area may be responsible for stray gas getting into the groundwater that's bubbling up there. Here's what it looks like just one county over from there. This is a geyser shooting methane-infused water 30 feet into the air. That geyser's located right by 3 natural gas drilling wells operated apparently by Shell Oil. Images like that are the kind of thing that can have real political impact, that can make the drilling issue less like science, less like geology, less like geology becoming business, and more like policy and politics. And sometimes it is more than just images. Okay, Timpson, Texas. Timpson, Texas, T-I-M-P-S-O-N. 10:15 local time on the morning of May 10th. In Timpson, Texas, the ground begins to shake. Timpson is in East Texas. And that morning in May, something that residents there are really not used to happened. A 3.7 magnitude earthquake.
East Texas has experienced a space shuttle crash, a devastating hurricane, and now add earthquake to the disasters.
Seismologists first recorded the tremor around 10:15 this morning. A 3.7 earthquake was felt in portions of Shelby, Nacogdoches, and Panola counties.
A 3.7 magnitude earthquake in East Texas, sort of unheard of. The Timpson city secretary told a local news station that she initially thought a nearby train had derailed. She said it shook the whole city hall for about 15 to 20 seconds. Even the experts couldn't seem to figure it out. Gary Patterson of the U.S. Geological Survey in Memphis says survey geologists are baffled by the event. He says, quote, "It's not where we normally see earthquakes in Texas." This was kind of a mystery, this thing in Timpson, Texas. No injuries were reported. There was some minor damage to local buildings, but a 3.7 magnitude earthquake came and went in a place there never are earthquakes, and nobody seemed to know why. Then a week later, it happened again.
For the second time in just a week, and just the 4th time since 1981, an earthquake has struck in East Texas. A little after 3 o'clock this morning, a 4.3 magnitude earthquake hit about 4 miles east of Timpson. The quake hit only about 6 miles from where last week's earthquake was reported.
So in the space of just 7 days, 2 separate earthquakes struck an area of Texas that is not known for having earthquakes. A second one, that 4.3 magnitude quake, was the strongest earthquake to hit East Texas in nearly half a century. Then 3 days later, it happened again. A 2.7 magnitude earthquake struck in the exact same area. A week and a half later, another one. This one clocked in as a 2.5 magnitude quake. A week after that, the ground began to shake beneath North Texas. A 2.3 magnitude earthquake struck just south of Fort Worth in the town of Cleburne. That was June 5th. Then this happened just 10 days later.
3.1 magnitude earthquake has struck an area just north of Cleburne. That's near Fort Worth. The U.S. Geological Survey says it happened just after 2 a.m. Thankfully, no damage or injuries have been reported.
So at this point, areas in North and East Texas, which do not typically experience earthquakes at all, have been hit with 6 earthquakes in the span of about a month. That last one in Cleburne, Texas, happened on June 15th. Then on June 23rd, there was another one. On June 24th, there was another one. On June 26th, there was another one. On June 29th, there was one more. 4 more earthquakes in North Texas in the span of 1 week.
People simply telling us they've never seen anything like this before. Their houses, their businesses going through these earthquakes. And for many of them, they don't believe this is just a natural coincidence.
Yeah, you think? They don't believe this is a natural coincidence. Over a span of 40 days between June and July, North Texas was rocked by an astonishing 11 separate earthquakes. But there's something really interesting about where those earthquakes were hitting. The Houston Chronicle put together this map. All the little blue markers that you see there are earthquakes that have struck North Texas since the beginning of the year. All of the little red markers are known natural gas drilling sites. Notice a pattern? Ever since fracking has been allowed in that part of the country, the region has seen a dramatic and unmistakable uptick in the frequency and intensity of earthquakes. In 2009, in what's called the Mid-Continent region, there were 50 earthquakes total. In 2010, that number jumped from 50 earthquakes to 87 earthquakes. In 2011, last year, that number shot from 87 earthquakes all the way up to 134 earthquakes in 1 year. What's the cause for this? A brand new study out this week from the University of Texas now echoes what at least 3 other recent studies have shown. The earthquakes in Texas may be caused by natural gas drilling in the area. Actually, not the drilling specifically, but the process of injecting the wastewater from that drilling back into the earth. The UT study found that most of the epicenters for these quakes were located within 2 miles of 1 or more wastewater injection wells. Despite all the evidence now piling up that the process of natural gas drilling may, in fact, not just be causing methane to creep into the water supply in places like Colorado and Texas, as if that weren't bad enough, but now also may be causing earthquakes in Texas. Despite all of that evidence, the politics around it haven't seemed to change just yet. The Texas Railroad Commission, which for some reason regulates all drilling in Texas, I don't know why either, they are currently denying any link between wastewater disposal wells and earthquakes in Texas, telling the Fort Worth Weekly, quote, "Commission staff have no science or data at this time linking these minor seismic events to oil field activities." At this time, no science or data. At this time, times may be changing. Joining us now is Terrance Henry, former editor, writer, and web producer for The Washington Post and The Atlantic. Lately, he's been writing a lot about Texas fracking as energy and environment reporter for State Impact Texas, which just published some great work about this. Terrance, it's nice to see you. Thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me, Rachel.
So in terms of me explaining what's been happening in Texas and what we know about the science here, did I get anything wrong there? Did I leave anything important out?
No, I think you covered it pretty well. Like you said, there's been a huge spate of earthquakes recently, particularly in North Texas. The important distinction, I think, is that fracking isn't causing the earthquakes, but it's the disposal of wastewater from fracking. And what's happening is they have to essentially take this water, sand, and chemical mixture and put it in a giant underground dumpster. Some of these disposal wells are more than 13,000 feet deep. And when they're doing this, it's causing some faults to slip, and it's causing some of these small earthquakes in places, like you said, that have had no seismic activity really before this time.
Do they have to be dumping their wastewater 13,000 feet deep into the earth? Do they have other options for other ways they could handle this part of the drilling process?
Well, that could be something they'll start looking at some of these wells that have been blamed for the earthquakes. Not all of these disposal wells in this area of seismic activity have caused the quakes, but about 70 of them have. So one thing they could stop doing is stop injecting the wastewater down there. Another thing they could do is just put it in a different disposal well that's known not to cause quakes. There's a possibility of treating it, setting it back certain distances from seismic areas. So there are options to deal with it.
It does seem like, I mean, if this weren't serious, it would seem like an almost comic game of what could possibly go wrong. One of the rejoinders to the concern about this so far has been essentially that these earthquakes are small, that aside from some very minor damage, these have not been the kinds of earthquakes that should be thought of as disasters or that are causing any real harm to humans. Is there any assurance that the quakes will never be larger than they have been so far, now that there seems to be very strong correlation between this part of the drilling process and the quakes themselves?
Well, we talked to the U.S. Geological Survey about that, and they said there isn't any assurance that they won't, become more intense. Obviously, as you pointed out, and our reporting's covered, the frequency has definitely increased, and you are seeing quakes up to 3.5, 3.7 in areas that never had earthquakes before. So the open question is, well, right now it's resulting in some broken windows and cracked walls and foundations. But what about quakes that happen in areas where there are natural gas or oil pipelines that weren't built to specifications to withstand earthquakes?
That was going to be my last question. Because this area is not seen as this area is not seen as being earthquake prone. Infrastructure that's in these areas for all sorts of things, but particularly infrastructure around the oil and energy industries, it's not built to withstand quakes, is it?
I think that's a question that hopefully, the Railroad Commission and drillers themselves will look into. The thing to remember is that the quakes have been pretty small in size, and also the distance that the quake has gone has been pretty small. So far it's been very localized effects and minor damage, but certainly as drilling happens and closer and closer to people and their homes, and people start feeling earthquakes because of it, it's going to bring up these questions, and hopefully this is something that we can all look into.
Terrance Henry, energy and environment reporter for State Impact Texas. Again, your work on this has been both more comprehensive than anybody else, but also really clear. So thank you for helping us cover this story. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks.